Hello guys and welcome to this tutorial. In the previous tutorial we used a query parameter to pass in a value to the action class, and we used this query parameter and value, and we created a property for the action, and we learned that there are interceptors that actually get that value and populate this property of the action which is there in the value stack, so that we have it available and we don't have to worry about getting the property. It's automatically copied and made ready for us. So this is one of the ways in which we can pass values to a HTTP request. This is the get. There is another way we can do it, which is the post. So we'll take a look at how we can do the same thing with post, and we're going to look at another approach which is actually preferred when you're working with starts2 applications. Okay, so here is a get request. We have a query parameter which is obviously a get, and we have learned that the interceptor is going to take this value and populate the corresponding property in the action class. But what's going to happen if we do a post request? Does the interceptor check for that as well, or do we have to do something else? Let's try that out. So I'm going to create a new JSP. I'll create a new JSP file, and then I'll call this search form.jsp and finish. So this is going to be our search page, which will have a text box. Instead of having a query parameter, I'm going to have a text box and then a submit button, and the user can enter the language that they want to search tutorials for and then hit submit. So this will be a new form here, and I have some HTML over here for the language and the submit. So the form, I'm going to make method as post so that it's not the default get, and the action. Okay, now here's the thing. The action could be the URL of the action that we have, which is this one, tutorials and get tutorial.action. So let me just copy this and see how it works. All right, so I have a form which is doing a post to the action which we are interested in. Of course, we tried to do a get, but now we are trying to do the post for the same action. So I enter the same URL over here for the action, and then I have one input text which has the language as the name, and then we have a submit button. Okay, now let's save and run this. We'll see what's gonna happen. So I will change this to a search form.jsp. Okay, for some reason the text box is showing up as black here, so let me just open this in a browser. Okay, so I'm gonna enter this in a browser, and okay, so here we have a text box and a submit button. So if I enter Java over here and press submit, it's gonna go to Java Brains, and if it's anything else, it's going to say language not supported yet. So as you can see, the value is going in right. So the Java value is being picked up properly. It is actually populating the action class, the member variable of the action class, with the right value. So irrespective of whether it is a get or a post, the interceptor is going to intelligently detect that the parameter that's being passed has the same value as the member variable over here, and it's going to populate it. So this is one advantage. You don't have to worry about a get request or a post request. As long as the parameter matches the member variable of the action class, you're all set. It's going to automatically copy the value by default. Okay, so having said that, take a look at this search form. This form here is pure HTML. So you have a form tag, and that has a method and an action. You have two inputs, one for a text box and one for a button, and then we are closing the form tag. So this form is pure HTML. And this works. We've just tried this out and we know that it works. As long as it's a post request, it doesn't really matter where that request is coming from. It could be a HTML page that triggers the request. But the thing is, Struts2 provides some tags that you can use for generating this content. And as long as you're using a Struts2 application anyway, unless there's a very good reason, you should try to implement the Struts2 tags, because one, they make it a bit easier, and then secondly, they have some extra features that do come in handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out and I'll replace this with a Struts2 form. So they are Struts2 tags that are equivalent to the tags that you see over here. So there is a Struts2 tag equivalent to the form. There is a Struts2 tag that's equivalent to a text box input over here, and then there is an equivalent Struts2 tag for a submit. So we'll replace that and we'll see that that works as well. And it actually is simpler to link to actions if you're using a Struts2 tag. So let's try that out now. So the first thing that I need to do in order to use Struts2 tags is, of course, to add the tag lib. So I'll add that first. I have that copy pasted. I'll just paste it here. So I'm declaring a tag lib with the prefix of s, and this is for the struts tags. So now that I've declared this tag lib, I can do a s colon, and then Eclipse is going to give me a list of suggestions. So I'll do a s colon, and then there is a s colon form. So I'll use this. The s colon form has only one attribute that it requires. I'll do a control space so that it gives the list of possible attributes. And now here I will choose the action. So this is what is required. Now notice what it says here. It says set the action name to submit to without the dot action suffix. So this is one of the advantages. You don't have to type in a dot action suffix because this is a struts form after all. So it knows your struts configuration. So all I need to do is choose this action, and then I'll take this. It has to have the namespace as well. So I'll add the namespace, but I do not use the dot action. Because it's really redundant. We don't have to do it because struts already knows what your extension is. It'll intelligently figure it out. So this is all I need to do as a definition of my struts form. So I'm just specifying the action without the dot action. Okay, so now the form is done. Now I need to add the text box. So the equivalent for the text box is s colon text field. So this text field generates a text box, and there's one other interesting trick over here. So let me just type this out and I'll show you. This text field requires something called as a key. Now the key is the property that you want to assign this value to. So in your action, whatever property you want the value to get populated to, that property is going to be your key. So you have to put the name of the member variable in your action that you want this value to get populated to. So we'll leave it at that, and I'll just come back to this once I show you the HTML that I was talking about. Okay, so text field is done. This line alone generates a text box, and it also knows that this is the value that it needs to populate to. And now I need to add the submit button. So the submit is s colon submit. There you go. And this is it. So this is, if you compare, you can obviously see that this is a much simpler version of the form when you compare it to this HTML form. And since we are using struts anyway, it's always a good thing to have this. The only reason why you would not want to use this is if you're not allowed to use struts to tags for some reason, or you want this page to be a HTML, in which case a HTML form is ideal. But as long as you're using JSPs and you're using struts to tags, it's always better to use a struts form. Okay, so let me remove this set of HTML tags. So now we know that our JSP has only struts tags for generating the form. So I'll save this and let's try accessing this page again. Okay, so I'll paste this URL, and you notice here right away there is one difference. There is a label and then there's a colon and then you have the text box. So it was a plain text box earlier, now you actually have a label, and the label happens to be the key that you have entered in your struts tag. So we'll take a look at what the HTML is, but let's just make sure that this continues to work fine. So I'll enter Java and hit submit. Okay, it comes to Java Brains, so this is working fine. So the language property is getting populated with the text box value that I've entered here. But okay, now let's take a look at this label, and in fact let's do a view source. So you see here, it's actually generating the HTML form, obviously, because it has to go get rendered in the browser. So the ID is get tutorial, name is get tutorial, and the action is tutorials / get tutorial. It is doing a post by default, and you notice here, so this is where it's actually generating the text box. So it's generated a label over here, and it has generated the text box as usual with the input type equals text and name equals language. So there are a few other things. It's generating an ID over here, but we don't really worry about that at this point of time. And of course, there is input type equals submit, which is required for the submit. So essentially what it's doing is it is almost the same HTML that we had typed. There are a few extra additions, but for as far as the functionality is concerned, it is the same HTML, but it is doing all these things behind the scenes. It has created a label for us, and it has created a text box along with the submit button. So now this is not really an ideal label. In a real world application, you wouldn't want to actually display the name of the property of your action. You might have something else and you want to display something else to the user. So in that case, what we can do is in our text field tag, you have something called as a label property. So I can add any label I want here, enter the language you want to search for. Okay, so I'm not going to add the colon here. It's just going to be the text. So save, and let me reload the page. So there you go. It has displayed the entire label along with the additional colon, and you can also see that the form has been aligned properly. So the text box is moved, the submit button has moved, so it all looks good. You don't have to worry about alignment. Struts2 tags takes care of all that, and it also gives you the label that you want, so you don't actually display the property name over here. So this is, let's do a view source again. So this is actual HTML like we saw, and there are some things that it does in order to track internally. It's actually creating a table in order to do all this alignment, and it has this name, action underscore property name, that it is used in a couple of places over here. So you see here the ID of the text box is action underscore property name. So, and even here it is the action underscore 0. So you don't have to worry about all this. Know that it's generating HTML for you, and it does all these other additional things which justifies using struts tags. Before I wind up, there's one thing that I want to point your attention to, and I don't know if you've already noticed. You notice the action over here. The action is tutorials / get tutorial. There is no dot action over here, and you must be wondering why. We will cover this in a little bit more detail in a subsequent tutorial, but what's interesting to know is, let me take you back to Eclipse. Okay, so you see here, let's open this get tutorial.action. So this is the URL that we had used earlier. We are directly calling the action URL, and we are passing a get parameter, correct? So notice what happens if I remove this dot action. I'm removing this, and I'm just using get tutorial. I don't have a .action suffix. It still works. It's still showing Java brains. So this is something we'll cover in a subsequent tutorial, but I just wanted to point that out. And if you're curious, you can explore and see why this is happening. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next tutorial.